morning, all of you. Today is a special day for School of Letters. We have a very, very special guest with us, Sri Mahesh Dattani. One of the most celebrated, one of the most daring, I would say, or perhaps one of the most innovative playwrights in contemporary Indian theatre. And we are very happy. I know we are very happy because of this. He is the first Indian English dramatist to win Kendra Sahitya Akademi Award. He is indeed very versatile as a dramatist, as a director, as an actor, as a film director, a Bharatanatyam performer, and whatnot. School of Letters has contributed a lot to Kerala theatre. There's Professor G. Shankar Pillai, one of the founders of modern Malayalam theatre. He was the first director of School of Letters. He passed away in 1989, January 1st. Every year on January 1st, we remember him and we perform or we enact a play. Faculty and students join hands and perform plays, and we have been doing it for more than 30 years. There are also other important personalities associated with the School of Letters who also contributed to theatre. Professor Narendra Prasad, Professor P. Balachandran, etc. So School of Letters has enriched theatre a lot. Till recently we had a MPhil course in theatre studies. We offer elective course in theatre studies, common elective course for theatre studies. And our students, they are studying 2 of your plays, Final Solutions and Tara. So students are really excited too. So when I contacted Sri Dattani, I had a little apprehension about his response. So when I contacted him through email, I got a very positive response. And I was really moved because of that. On behalf of School of Letters, let me warmly welcome Sri Mahesh Dattani to this program. He is accompanied by his sister. May I welcome you also to this program. Dear colleagues, teachers from other colleges, other universities, research students, PG students, and all the participants here, I welcome all of you to this function. And we have structured this session in this manner. Sri Dattani has promised to give a short exposition of his ideas, a brief section highlighting his politics as a playwright. And of course, he's not going to give you a formal lecture. So he's going to share his experiences as a playwright for a while. and he would be very keen to listen to your questions, and he would be very happy to answer your queries. That's what he told. So I request all of you to actively take part in the interactive session. So once again, welcome all of you to this program. So with these words, let me welcome Mahesh Dattani to give his lecture.
I'm sure you can hear me at the back.
Yes.
Yeah, so I really don't.
Okay.
Yeah, one of the things which, in my opinion, is the enemy of theatre is the microphone. Because people come to the theatre for an experience that the performer and the audience, that what is it that we're breathing the same air, and that, of course, given the pandemic, may be somewhat tragic to say, but the fact is that it's the air we breathe, it's the voice that connects to the ear directly, it's the action that you receive visually. I think that is what theatre has to offer that cinema and television can't offer. Cinema and television is about processing. That is, they're very, very technical mediums, and it's about capturing something, a story, and what you see is a second-hand experience in that sense. Of course, it's an art form, but the art lies more in putting pictures together to create some kind of a story which you receive. But theatre works, I think it works differently, and I think it requires the human contact for it to be very effective. But when I see even music performances, classical singers, completely dependent on the microphone, I feel we've lost something. I mean, these traditions go way before the microphone was invented. So what did the actors do? What did the singers do then? They used their voices. They learned how to reach out. And I think that has a spiritual, a physical, a mechanical quality to it, which cannot be replaced by any other forms of entertainment. It's only in the performing arts that you have this sharing of time and space, in spite of course, we still have technology interrupting, but that's now a given. So, even if you look at it in terms of quantum physics or quantum mechanics, and please, the experts, forgive me if I say something very naive and basic, is that I set off a motion, and if you're in the same space as I am, in this cube of space that we have, like even if I do this, what I'm doing with my arm is that I'm creating a vibration, I'm displacing the air, and somewhere that vibration is reaching your body, and quantum physics have proved that what happens when your body receives vibrations, it actually expands, right? So there is a sense of an opening of the body. So it's very real, it's very tangible in that way. I think similarly when it comes to feelings and emotions, and again, a lot of people conflate feelings and emotions. I think they're completely different. If you translate that, I mean, the way it connects in a shared space is different from the way it connects in not the same space. If a story, I know I'm not explaining this correctly, I'm searching for words here, is that if you're looking at a digital image, right, the storytellers are not in the same space as you, right? They're probably elsewhere working on another project. So there's nothing displaced, there's nothing, what it's counting on is your memory and it's also counting on your appreciation of the aesthetics of that art form, cinema or whatever, right? Of course, theatre has its aesthetics, so you do have the sophisticate who understands the language of a particular form, but it's wonderful that more and more theatre is going away from the forms that trigger memory, right? Now, if, just to give you an example, again, I can only think of what I know. If I were to be, let's say that I'm, a Bharatanatyam dancer, which I was in another lifetime, right? So, which would mean that if I use this mudra, it means something. This could be a deer, right? And this could be a bee. Now, this is something that you, as sophisticated audiences, would know that this is what. So, in that sense, I'm using a descriptive body to tell my story. Fortunately, in my opinion, fortunately, that we're going back towards the expressive body, which is what we started with, is that the expressive body came even before language. That so much of theatre now is going back towards the expressive body rather than using the descriptive body, which is a form of mime. Again, mime has its own languages, but where there is an expectation of sophistication in the audience that this is how it's received. Just as language is, the spoken language is also a sophisticated means of expression. That if you understand English language, then you understand what I'm saying, right? Now, if you speak in chaste Malayalam, I'm not sophisticated enough to understand what you're saying. So again, even the spoken language has its, but where is this language coming from? It's coming from my voice. Now the voice is archetypal, right? That is expressive. So if I may say something, my intention to say it will come through in the tone, in the way my pitch rises or falls or whatever, and that is the expressive language, which, of course, we've used that quite often in the theatre, but we're going back towards putting the emphasis where it belongs, that is the expressive body and the expressive voice. Now, having said that, I am known to write very verbose texts, right? So the question that I ask myself at this stage is that where does my theatre belong in this freeing of form, so to say, or looking for another form, is where does it belong? For a long time I was dismissed as an English language playwright, and very, very unkind theatre people would just dismiss it as cantonment theatre. That was the name that was given to the kind of theatre I did. But I was very, very pleased about 5 years ago. No, I think it was more than that, about 10, 12 years ago, when I was invited to Japan by the Japan Foundation. And one of the groups there, I was informed, will do my play in Buto style. Right? Now, Buto is a Japanese dance form which was completely a breakaway from the traditional no theatre and the very rigid principles of no theatre movement. And so you had completely expressive bodies, sort of, very intense things and sudden bursts of energy and sudden stillness and things which are very interesting. And you also used sounds more than speech. So when I went there, I saw a Buto performance and there was all that happening, and I was waiting for my play to begin. After that, there was a Q&A which was translated to me in English. We had a headphone. I realized that what they performed was my play Final Solutions, without the words, right? I thought, what if you take away the words from my play, my fear is that there's nothing left. So I was most curious to know what did the audience get out of that, right? I was amazed at what they, of course the story didn't matter, but they got the insider, the outsider, the kind of when is the insider sort of taking the space over, when is the outsider claiming space. There was so much abstract expression, for want of a better word. I know that's a term used in fine arts, which came through that I was in some way relieved that thank God my play has a soul. It's not just the words. So I think that was a learning for me. The other thing that I'm concerned with today, and this is something that is a constant interaction I've had over the last decade or so with academicians who study my plays. Earlier my stance was that you can't really study a play on the page without understanding how it works in performance, right? So I always would start by saying, how many of you have seen my play perform? And there would be very few hands. And the reason is most people would say that we don't have access to performances, and we don't have such an active local theatre community that would perform these plays. And I would say that until you see it in performance, you can't really study the play. That was my stance, right? Now my stance is that if I am to say that my plays don't live on the page, right? They live on the stage. What is that stage? If it is so inaccessible, is it worth it? And that's a question that I've been thinking very often, having done the kind of semi-commercial theatre in the cities. I wonder whether it's really worth it if it tends to become very exclusive and inaccessible to people who are interested in the language that theatre offers. So then where exactly does my play live if it is not on the page? That's a question that I've been asking. And I feel that it can live in a classroom as like this. I think it can live in, under a tree. Will my plays then withstand this sort of redesigning of the performance arena? That's a question, of course, which I cannot answer. Time will tell. But I think redefining the performance arena is what my concern is, and it's not a new concern. That's been a concern, with modern theatre itself, as to where are we waiting for the big halls in Bombay? Are we waiting to get enough money from a producer to hire those halls and make all that publicity and hire the best actors available and do something and charge like 2,000 rupees a ticket? That whole machinery has to go, right? And what's coming in its place, that is the excitement that I feel charged with right now. So I'm looking at what exactly is it about a performance space? What then are the new requirements? I feel that and I was fortunate to sit in on a class of the City Theatre Company in New York, SITI. If you look them up, you'll find a lot of information about them. Now they are using a principle by actually a dancer who came up with something that she called very basically viewpoints, right? Now viewpoints is a great way of performing immediately in a space. Just to give you an idea, it came about when Mary Overley, who coined this whole thing of viewpoints, was a dancer, modern dancer in the 60s, I think, American dancer. And she had an assignment where she was to replace another modern dancer, a very famous one. So she went there a month in advance, so that she could rehearse what the other dancer is doing, so it was possible for her to carry on. And most of the time, the other dancer was meditating in the space that they were performing in, and she was being absolutely still, and there was very little communication between her and Mary Overley. And at some point, Mary asked, "But what am I dancing?" And she said, "Just take in the architecture of this place and respond to it." Right? So I think the architecture of the performance arena, even arena is a word that needs to go. Stage is a word that needs to go. One writer put it very beautifully and calls it the cube of space. This is the cube of space where we are in the middle of a performance right now. So the architecture of this cube of space will define the theatre. Something that is done here in this architecture will be different if it is done under a rain tree outside, and it would be even more different if it is done by the backwaters just a few miles away, where we went to yesterday and had a beautiful experience. So the architecture of the cube of space then becomes hugely important, and it's not that it has to be reconstructed. It doesn't have a prescription. It is responding to what is already there, and I think that is the magic of theatre. It's possible only in the theatre, and cinema and television need a great deal of contrivance to create that illusion that it's happening in a real place, in a real time. So architecture is one of the viewpoints that Mary Overley formed. Of course, the other viewpoints are more familiar. It is story, right? What is the story? And the story is not to be confused with the play. The story is much bigger, right? So what's the story? When I come here and perform this little piece, there's a story that's 40 years old or 30 years old, where there is some thinking going on which has brought me to this performance. And that's what is the story, and who are we telling that story to becomes the next question. Were I to address someone who's not a theatre student or a theatre professor, my story would be different. It has to be, something has to change. And I think there's so much boring theatre, and I'm also a part of it. I'm not saying that other theatre is boring. Mine isn't. Mine can be equally boring, and I've proved that often enough. That if something is boring, something must change. Now, two things can change. Either the audience changes, or the story needs to be told in a different way, right? You can't have this stasis of boredom in the name of theatre or art, and there's just too much of it happening, that because we have a more sophisticated story, that art is important and theatre is important and everything, so we sit through boredom believing that we're receiving some kind of emotional and cultural education, whereas if you're bored to tears, it's not working. It just isn't working. So I'll leave you with those thoughts, and I'm very happy to address your questions. But because Rajesh asked me to speak impromptu, I hadn't come prepared for this talk. I thought I would just share some of my concerns, in 2023. What exactly are my thoughts? What exactly am I thinking about my chosen art form? I thought I would share it with you, and you feel free to ask questions on what I just talked about, or whatever questions that you prepared.
Sir, who is your favorite playwright, and what kind of theatres you like?
Okay. Well, favorite playwright. I'm a little stuck with the playwrights who influenced me earlier on. But amongst the new playwrights, I've seen some very interesting works by Abhishek Majumdar and Anupama Chandrasekhar from Chennai. And the older ones, yes, major influence was Vijay Tendulkar and Mahesh Dattani, both Marathi playwrights, and also very big names in modern theatre.
He was our guest. Kujwar was our guest.
Oh, I see. Okay, yeah, he's wonderful. Yeah. So, in fact, I produced and directed his play when I was in my 20s, and he was kind enough to actually respond to my letter. I sent him a letter asking for permission, and he was very generously just said, yes, go ahead. And he even cracked a joke about us sharing the same first name. So it's wonderful. So he was a major influence. The kind of what I call the liminal space that he created, because a lot of his earlier works were about the transition from rural Maharashtra to urban, probably Bombay or Nagpur or one of the biggest cities. So I think I just love these characters in transition. That I think a lot of my writing is really exploring liminal spaces where people are between transitions, transitioning from one to the other. Could be gender, as in 7 Steps Around the Fire. With Tara, it is a complete transition from sharing a body to being separated and separate lives as boy and girl. Final Solutions, the liminal space being that border between being thrown on the streets to a violent mob and taking shelter in a house, but the house is also filled with prejudice, so there is a liminal space created there. So I guess those are my favorite playwrights.
What kind of theatres do you like the most?
What kind of theatres? You mean form styles?
Like street theatre, folk
Oh,
theatre.
I see. Yeah. I like, I must say I'm fairly flexible because I do like so much of the theatre that I've seen indoors in a very conventional sort of European style. Proscenium Arch are also very good. And also, I mean, one of my most magical experiences was seeing Usha Nangyar do the Nangyar Kutu in a church courtyard, right? Now, all there was were those torches of fire, and she was sitting on the stool. And this entire world was created just with her Netra Abhinay, you know. And it wasn't even as if there was too much Hasta Abhinay. Most of the time, the arms were neutral, but what she did with her eyes, I can never forget in my life. I think that's one of my favorite experiences. And at the same time, ironically, another experience that I can never forget is watching kabuki theater in Japan, in Tokyo. Right? Now, this is just the polarity of Nangyar Kutu, where you have a stool and you have 2 torches and you have the performer and all you see. Whereas the kabuki theater has magical sets, it has orchestra, it has music, it has grand entries, it has this Hanamichi kind of a ramp where the protagonist lands, and there is major sophisticated language used, body language and pitch, which is very interesting if you know enough of it. I didn't, but I managed to read a little bit so that I could appreciate what was. But it was magical because it transformed the main actor. The play that I saw was about a 16-year-old girl who saves a village from the enemy because she goes up to the tower and rings the bell and then dies, tragically. So it's a very beautiful, tragic story of sacrifice and all that. And the kabuki actor who played that was a 50-year-old man, you know, with a ball. Like when you see the picture in the brochure, you realize here was this man with a pot belly and, you know, a balding pate. And he played the 16-year-old girl. And it's complete construction. I think that is an exercise in how artificially gender is constructed, because within 10 minutes you could actually believe he was a 16-year-old girl, because everything down to the little finger, down to the pitch of the voice, you know, and the movements, and of course the sort of oblique feminine movements, and everything was so studied that it was so beautiful, and at the same time it was a huge political statement as well. Right, that, okay, is this what gender is? Is that all it is? And sometimes you're frightened that yes, maybe that's all there is to it. You know, that it's all how the art of construction. So yes, those were my favorite plays.
Actually, sir, I've got two questions for you. The first one is, which among your plays are you proud of in terms of the audience response? Then the next question is, among the characters in your plays, like Tara and Final Solutions, which characters were inspired by real people, and did you consult those people before writing, if they are there?
Mm-hmm. Okay, both very, okay. Sorry, the first question again?
The first question is, which play are you proud of in terms of the audience response?
Okay, which play am I proud of? Well, I'm proud of the fact that I've written so many plays. That itself is an achievement. You know, I think in terms of, I think you did add in terms of audience reception, right?
Yes.
Now, here's the thing, it's not an easy question to answer. I'm very proud that I wrote a play called Dance Like a Man, which is commercially my most successful play. It's done over 1,000 shows altogether. In fact, one production has been going on for 20 years now. Right? So yes, I'm very proud I wrote it. I never expected that play to do so well. But I'm also proud of a play I wrote, 30 Days in September, which is a play on surviving sexual abuse at childhood. And it was a commissioned play by an NGO who work with survivors of childhood sexual abuse. And it was a very difficult play to write. And I had several interviews because it was through an NGO, so I had the good fortune that there were people who are willing to share their life experiences with me. And I think I've made them, I'm proud to say I made them comfortable enough for them to share their stories with me. And that took a lot of doing in terms of craftsmanship, because I couldn't really do anything insensitive. I didn't want to create just another victim space, because that's pointless, saying, oh, you know, these are victims and you know, they're suffering a lot, which doesn't say anything. I really wanted to make it a survivor story. You see them struggling with their demons and overcoming obstacles that they face, not necessarily from the perpetrator, because that act has happened, but the loss of dignity and the loss of self, or loss of ego in that sense. So I'm particularly proud of that, because the reactions were very powerful. Like for instance, I remember the very first show. This person, she came up to me and said, may I hug you? And I said, yes, of course you may. And she gave me such a warm hug, and there were tears, and she said, this is my story that you told, and I'm so happy you did that. And several years later, she founded her own NGO, and counsels people who have been through the trauma of sexual abuse. So that did make me very proud, and I am very proud that if I could make even that one change, I think it's worth being a writer and a director for that. So yes, I guess those are the two plays that stand out. But there are others that I'm proud of, but I don't want to give you a whole list.
I asked two questions actually.
Oh,
The characters.
sorry?
Which characters in Tara and Final Solutions were inspired by real people? And if they are there, did you consult those people before writing the play?
Yes. Well, Final Solutions is my sister Padma's here. Is the character of Daksha, the child bride, was based on my mother, right? Because I wrote the play before the internet, so it was very hard to get like human research done. I mean, I could get the politics of partition and through newspapers and magazines and experts and things, but to get a human research from a real person. So I just happened to ask my mom, you know, how was it growing up? You know, you went to school in the small town. Did you have any Muslim friends? And she said, of course, you know, there was this girl in my class and she had 5 sisters and they were all so pretty and, you know, they were Muslims, Khoja Muslims, that's a community of Gujarati Muslims. And so I said, great, so they were your friends? I said, yeah, she was my friend. And I asked her, did you go to her house after school? And she said, of course not, we did not go, and they did not come. It was understood that they could be friends in school, but they're not going to visit each other's homes because they're completely different religions, right? So that became the what do you call the spine of this character, who is so fond of music, film music, that she seeks the friendship of these Muslim sisters who are just outside her locality, and how she transgresses social boundaries by becoming friends with them and visiting them in the home because she wanted to listen to the gramophone. So that's how I dramatized the story. And again, 30 Days in September, the story is a collection of several stories of real people. Final Solutions, again, the character of Javed and the character of Bobby are loosely based on friends I had. And the entire cricket match story, if you know the play, the one which Javed experienced his loss of dignity, that's a real story, that's a real incident. It actually happened. And I visited the area where the corner plot belonged to this very upper class Brahmin family, very religious, etc. And just adjacent to that, there's a building with these Muslims living there, and the boys would play cricket on the street. So yes, those are the examples I can give.
Thanks. Who's next?
Homosexuality and gender identity are recurring themes in your plays. Can you please tell what inspires you to choose such themes that are not written by many other writers? Have you had to face any inconveniences for choosing such themes?
Okay, sorry, what are the themes? Sexuality and?
Homosexuality and gender identity.
And?
Gender identity.
Okay, gender identity. Okay, well, yes, that's again, I'm proud to say that when I wrote On a Muggy Night in Mumbai, which was based on a shorter play of mine, Night Queen, which actually Hoshang Merchant published in his collection of gay literature. At that time, I'm proud to say that there was no Indian play that had protagonists who were openly gay, and the concern was love between two gay people. So yes, that's one play which I'm very proud of. And did I face any opposition? No. And I think this is something that, if I'm honest, for us artists, we thrive on controversy. So we look for controversial subjects. So I don't think we fight shy that, oh, you know, this is not going to, actually we say, yes, please, please, say that it's horrible and that it mustn't be done. Please, please ban it, you know. So that is part of who we are. I guess gender identity, again, you know, those are not the subjects that have faced any kind of in fact, it's the other way. Yes, I mean, there are people who might want to dismiss it and say, like when On a Muggy Night in Mumbai was performed, there was one section of the audience that was very clear that this doesn't happen in India. This only happens in the West, right? So in some ways, it was a slightly westernized culture, and suddenly I realized that, oh my God, I've fallen into my own trap. This is exactly what they want to do, and I've given it to them on a platter. So yes, that was a bit of an opposition there. But at the same time, I think the acclaim was far greater with email messages coming in saying, at last we have a play that represents LGBTQ issues. And the one which again, another play I'm very proud of is 7 Steps Round the Fire, which deals with gender identity and is about how trans women, especially in the Hijra community, seek sisterhood and motherhood in different ways. That it's not the way we in a heteronormative society understand it to be, and how those bonds can be very strong, sometimes even stronger than biological bonds. And that, I think, is another play, and I had no opposition to it as such. And the only people I was really scared of were trans people. What will they make of it? Here's a cisgendered man writing about trans women. What does he know? What does he get? Right? So those are real concerns as to what exactly are you doing. But I was very fortunate that the trans people who did see it said thank you again. They may have had some sort of issues with nuances and things, which I corrected, but overall they were very moved. Recently the play was done in Boston, and there were members of the trans community in Boston of Indian origin who were the guests of honor in that. And in their speech, you know, they had a seminar after that. They were saying how moved they were to see that the plight of the Hijra community, whom they are in touch with, was presented in a play to a cisgendered audience, and how you know, important it was for this kind of a dialogue through theatre. So that was.
Sir?
Yes.
As we all know, India has to surpass China to become the largest source of largest human resource. But despite having such a large number of people,
Yeah, it's okay. I can hear you now. Yeah.
despite having such a large number of people, why do you think is that there are not many artists who are recognized globally from India?
Okay, now why is, if I've understood the question, is that despite there being so many talented people, why aren't they acknowledged globally, right? Now, I personally don't see that as an issue, right? I think there has to be, now what is global? We're global too, right? So people whom we choose can be globally acclaimed as well, right? Now, there's so many Malayalam writers and theatre practitioners that I, living in Bombay, don't know anything about. Right? Now, that is a problem that I face. It has nothing to do with the writers, right? They are who they are. Now, in my opinion, it's really the political environment that decides who's famous and who's not. I don't think it is really a yardstick of the ability or the talent. In fact, I read a very interesting article in the New York Times which said that all these artists whom we consider famous became famous because they belonged to the right social circles, because their friends promoted them. That's how there were so many people who were probably even more talented whom we don't know of because they didn't belong in the right circles. So I think I wouldn't want to fall into that trap that who is internationally acclaimed or nationally acclaimed and who isn't. I know it's important to have it's very important to have your audience or people, but I think it's also very important that you're true to your art, right? And you're true to your language of expression. And what its reach is, it's really not, it's not in your hands. It really isn't, because it's a combination of many things, and talent is just one of them.
Thank you, sir.
Maybe can I add something to you?
Sure.
Because actually the language in a way gives some kind of reach for
The spoken language, yes, absolutely right. That some writers, especially if you're looking at it, are so expressive and their facility with their language is so good that it becomes their undoing, because then they're untranslatable, right? That they pale in comparison with translations, in translation, right? So, but then are we saying that they shouldn't do what they're doing? I think that's a horrible thing to say, right? It's just completely wrong. I think it's our perspective. I feel that there is no easy answer. Thank you. I don't think there is any easy solution or answer to this concern that some have not reached out beyond their local boundaries. I think that makes their art even more relevant, that they mean so much to a region. And you never know, I think history may think differently of those writers at some point, right? So I think I really don't have an answer to that. But yes, it has so much to do with the form, like if language is what, I mean, look at Shakespeare, right? Now, he invented English, he had his own meter, he did all this. Had we not been colonized, I don't think we would be so enamored by Shakespeare, right? I think it would have been completely inaccessible to us. The fact that, his dramaturgy was so strong that he lives on in translations and adaptations as well, that what one can appreciate is the dramatic content of his work, right? But the language can only be appreciated if you know English, right? And we just happen to know it because we were colonized and English was thrust upon us at some point, right? So what? Then do we sort of colonize other regions and thrust Malayalam on them? And it just is. It is political. This whole reach thing it's a very political thing. We don't see it as politics, and we just assume it's to do with the capability and talent of the individual. But I think it's very political.
May I just one more question?
Yes, please.
You write in English.
Yes.
So to what extent actually has this choice of the English maybe defined your dramaturgy theatre?
Well,
and also the reach.
Yeah. Well, initially it did define it because I was looking at European format, right? But when I studied Bharatanatyam and I was introduced to different forms of storytelling, especially the more descriptive forms like the Varnam, I mean that's a very descriptive form. I think all my plays have a story within the story, right? Like for Tara, I had the doctor giving his sort of story about how he went about the separation, and Dan is a story about finding a story as well. So I think writing in English limited me in some ways, but also freed me because I was formless in some ways, that I didn't subscribe to a particular form. The only form that I feel that I broke away was this well-made play structure form, which is very European. But then I'm not the only one following it because I write in English. Even writers in other languages follow the well-made play structure. Modern theatre is very much, in fact, the whole concept of a novel, writing a novel is a Western concept. It's not an Indian concept. We wrote as poetry, and if you look at the Natya Shastra, the playwright is called the Kavi, right? So Kavi is used for poet and for playwrights.
Sir, while writing on plays which concern with very sensitive topics such as in final solutions, because in the current scenario, many such sensitive, once dealing with such sensitive topics are being highly censored.
Yeah.
So what's your view on that also?
That's the play which is a matter of concern. Now, in fact, I was having a conversation with a director in Bombay just a few months ago, that it's surprising that this is the play that got me the Sahitya Academy Award, but it would be very difficult for me to do a new production of this play today in the current scenario. Maybe I could do it in Kerala or Bengal, but not anywhere else. Yeah, because the climax is that you have this Muslim boy holding the idol of Krishna and saying, look, it's the touch of humanity, and this idol is not going to suddenly fall into ashes because I've touched it. Yeah? Now, it seems like basically you're just saying there are no boundaries, let's just blur the boundaries. But now, when the boundaries are so clearly being drawn politically, right, I think it would be a very dangerous thing to do now, because I would definitely get into trouble, right? But having said that, I'm hopeful that things will change, that we'll see sense that there is too much at stake to have these kind of divisions being made, because we're sitting on this tinderbox and our politicians want to light it, right? And it's really up to us to snuff it out before everything blows up again. Yes, it definitely is a matter of concern. Were I to say I want to do another production of it now, I might find it very difficult to find producers who would want to do it.
So I would like to ask you, you're a director, actor, playwright, dancer, performer, writer. So which field do you enjoy the most, or in which field you resonate yourself the most?
Well, yeah, I know I sound like a jack of all over there. I think what stayed, I gave up acting long ago. I don't act anymore, and I don't dance anymore. I mean, the body has left me years and years ago. So I guess I enjoy, these are the three things that I continue to do, and I enjoy them thoroughly. One is writing, directing, and teaching. I love all three, and I don't think I would feel very sorry that if I become ill and can't direct anymore, that would be very disheartening. So I think those are the things that resonate with me, writing, directing, and teaching.
So I have a related question.
Yes.
You are a director, you are an actor, sorry, you are a writer, you are a playwright, you are a director, and you also had acted. Now, does it make your writing easy or difficult?
Very good question. If you ask me, it informs my writing better. Because again, as writers, we tend to become a little precious with words and ideas and things. And the theatre is merciless, that if it's not working in space, out it goes. So I think as an experienced director, I know how things work in the real space, this cube of space we're talking about. And I think it means that my writing will not have this writerly quality, this kind of self-assumption that I am a juggler of words, or I am a wordsmith, or I am philosophically superior in some way. That sort of, it has curbed that, and I feel that my writing then becomes a lot more human. I don't know if that answered your question, but it does. The directing definitely informs my writing. And in a strange way, teaching informs my directing, because I am in touch with what is it that drama students are looking for, and the kind of forms that excite them and interest them, and how eager they are to get away from this whole hierarchy of the text and then the director and then the actor, that they want to find more agency in what they're doing, because it's such an important job in the theatre. The actor is really the king or queen. But we have, again, it's so ironic, isn't it, that as theatre artists, we're constantly questioning hegemonic structures and hierarchies. But in practice, when you're doing theatre, we subscribe to the same model to say, oh, the text comes first, then the director, then the actors, then the designers, and the lowly backstage workers. We so readily subscribe to that model. And I think it's wonderful that a lot of young people want to break away from that model completely. So yes, the teaching informs my directing, and my directing informs the writing. So that's probably why I enjoy all three. Yes.
Happy to meet you and listen to you. Actually, for University of Kerala students, we have Dance Like a Man for our MA students. And from our college, our MA students are planning to enact the play with respect to the drama club inauguration.
Oh, good.
So one more thing, before teaching any play, I used to tell my students, a play is like a cat. It has 9 lives, or maybe more. So the screenplay or the script that the playwright has, and how it gets manifested on stage. During the transformation, we have several improvisations, right from the setting, maybe the dialogues, mannerisms of the actors. So how do you, or maybe what is your take on it, depending on the place, your own place at the stage, any memorable experiences, any thoughts that you have to share?
Yes, absolutely. I think that's a wonderful way of explaining the process, that it's like having 9 lives. I would agree with you completely that when you write a play, what you're proposing is a relationship, like a marriage or an adoption or whatever, because it involves more than one person, right? So I think it's this relationship that brings in different avatars or lives. And I think the word which I'm very fond of today is plasticity. That the artist must have a plasticity with the art form. That there is a relationship with the art form. Just as if you're a sculptor working with clay, you have a relationship with that clay. Do you want it soft? Is it too hard? Maybe the mud you've chosen is a little hard or whatever, right? And so that's going to then determine the end work of art, what that piece of sculpture is going to be, right? It's the same with like stone, working with stone. Like, when Michelangelo did the statue of David, he did have a relationship with that slab of marble, right? Now, what was the density of that marble? How brittle was it, or how soft was it? How pliable was it? Was something he would negotiate with, and it wouldn't have been possible for him to sculpt the statue of David, say, without that plasticity, that relationship with his art. And in theatre, you have plasticity with so many people. You have plasticity with, first of all, as a playwright, you have plasticity with your society, plasticity with the writing, the language, the dramatic structure, your personal, very much like the Natya Shastra gives us the three dharmas that are prerequisites: the lok dharmi, the natya dharmi, mano dharmi. And I think it's so. That's what I love. That I always tell my students that if you want new ideas, read old books. If you want old ideas, read new books. Right? Because the young and the old, they are constantly recycled. Yes.
Just two observations and a query. It was very interesting to listen to you when you were responding to her saying you like writing, directing and teaching. I was just wondering, this is not a question. I was just wondering how you would, if at all there is an opportunity, how you would teach your own plays, whether that would be possible for a director. That's one thing. Then in the beginning you were talking about where your plays are actually, if there is no access to watch, if people have no access to your plays, where does it actually, remain? And then along with that, and then you were talking about, architectural cubic spaces, and I was wondering if, even if the plays, a play is not performed, definitely a play is meant for performance, but even if, people don't have access to its performance, when a play is discussed in a classroom, I was wondering whether that is a cubic space where the play is performed in an altogether different manner, probably.
Absolutely. That I do consider that as a performance as well. That the classroom can become the cube of space for performance. And again, you don't need the the Natya Dharmi aspect of it at all. That you could look at it completely from a dialogical perspective as well. But I still feel that ideally the situation is that you do see it in performance, because there's so much that's written for performance, like how a line sounds will change it completely, right? So often playwrights, and I do too, is that sometimes you have a line which is just the opposite of what the character intends. So it's a real intention that can come through with tone and sarcasm or undertone or whatever. So yes, you're losing out on that as well, but absolutely that itself is a performance, that you have this kind of dialectic discussion. That also is a performance. Yes.
Then with regard to Final Solutions, the play has been interpreted by many critics, particularly in Indian theatre criticism. People have looked at the play as an exhortation to forget your memories, or come out of memories, and I was just wondering whether that kind of a solution is ever possible.
Well, I don't think the play of now this is much misquoted because of the title Final Solutions. People think that it's about offering a solution, but actually I chose the title because of Hitler's pogrom. His idea of final solution was kill all the Jews, right? And so there is an irony there which tends to get lost. And this is what I mean when I said that, you know, sometimes writing becomes very writerly. And I think choosing that title was a very writerly kind of self-indulgent decision. And once you throw it out there, it's just confusing people as to what exactly is this final solution that this guy is saying we do have. Yes, it has been this whole thing about his Bobby's line that if you're willing to forget, I'm willing to tolerate, right? And lots of people have had lots of things to say. But having said that, I would defend the play by saying that the play is about selective memory. Right? So what you're forgetting is all memory is selected. I mean, I can talk about, in the good old days, right? And say that, everything was wonderful, you kids don't know anything. Right? I'm selecting the memories. I'm not sharing the bad old days with you when I say that, right? And we had a lot of rubbish going on when I was in my 20s, right? So all memory is selective, just as all history is fashionable or selective again. I think that's what the line is really about, that if you're willing to forget what you remember, right? Because the play ends with a desire to rewrite the history when she comes to know that they were angry because it was her own husband and father-in-law who burnt their shop. Right? And now she also is seeking redemption and wants to know if those boys will come back again so she can rewrite everything that she told them. But is that possible? It doesn't really. It just throws the question. I think theatre is very good at throwing up the right questions, not
answering.
Yeah,
Final solutions.
not offering final solutions.
So you have been writing for now around 35, producing plays for around 35 years. I think from mid-1980s, right?
That's right, yeah.
So it's almost 4 decades now. What are the changes that you have noticed in the way your plays and generally English plays are received, the audience?
Yeah. Well, there has been significant change, because when I started to write in the mid-80s, late 80s I would say, this whole thing, especially in the English language theatre, was truly cantonment theatre. The plays that were done were mostly Eurocentric, either in translation. At the most you would have Brecht being done in translation, or you would have some stupid English comedy being done on stage, and Indian actors pretending to be English. So it was a change. It was, in that sense, cutting edge, especially Dance Like a Man, because I wrote that. It was performed in 1988 first, and for an English-speaking audience to see characters who were Bharatanatyam dancers to actually use Bharatanatyam terminology, and to see that the entire plot revolves on their daughter's Arangetram going through. That was a big thing at that time. Now I guess language has become so much more easy. What I like about a lot of practitioners today, whether it's English or Malayalam or Hindi, they're not so self-conscious of the way they speak, right? My generation, we were very, very conscious. If we spoke Hindi, we had to speak it in a particular cultivated way. If you spoke English, you had to have your grammar intact. You couldn't make grammatical errors and things. Whereas I feel that today, people are far more expressive, and in Bombay, it's very, very easy to see youngsters using words from different languages in the same sentence. Right? So I think that's a great thing, that language has become expressive again. So I don't know, I've forgotten, what was your question? How was my writing changed, or the language?
The reception.
Reception. Well, yeah. I think reception is a little bit more staid. It's not, so it doesn't evoke extremes like extreme hatred or extreme love for it, that it's seen with a certain equanimity in that sense. And I guess people are more critical because they have seen a body of my work, so they have a tendency to compare my new writing to my old writing, as with all writers, stays. So yes, the reception is a little different, but I quite like it because it is critical, but at the same time very appreciated as well.
And let me add to Rohit's question. We are in the post-COVID period. What all changes, what all strategy are required in writing?
Well, I feel that something has changed, right? I don't know as teachers whether you've observed the change in students, but I can see it in my young actors and the whole approach to theatre, that there is this still this kind of caveman syndrome, that you've been in a cave too long and you are afraid to come out into the light kind of thing. And I think a lot of young people and even older people, because I took a long time to get out of it as well, we're all going through this. So it's a very I feel that something like theatre would definitely help in many ways. And I think what would be nice is to see writing come from this post-COVID where people have had very deep positive or negative experiences about this period of isolation and withdrawal, forcible withdrawal. And it would be very interesting to see what kind of writing comes from that, because it's an experience we have not, in our lifetimes, have not faced. That the last was during the Spanish flu, I think, when interestingly, I always encourage young writers to think about Shakespeare, because he went through two bubonic plagues in his time. In one of them, he lost his sister and his son. Interestingly, his son was named Hamlet. And after the loss of his son, he wrote Hamlet. And although the play is not about losing a son, it's about losing a father, I'm sure it resonates with his experience in that time during the plague where everyone had to stay indoors, that he had to flee London, the Globe Theatre had closed down, and he was in Stratford in his own house, and all the writers and actors and everyone he knew, he couldn't be in touch with, because the bubonic plague was pretty horrific in that sense. So, and he wrote Venus and Adonis, his poem, during the plague. He wrote it at that time, and even this, there was a society of writers that were formed during the plague, and they would meet up and tell their stories and things. So a lot, we've been through a lot, and it will reflect in some way. And that would be a positive thing, to get artistic work that comes from this experience. So, yes.
So, when we did a play here, our professor said that we have to change the set in between scenes as fast as we can, because the visual expectations of audience is designed widely by cinemas. In cinemas, scenes change in a fraction of seconds. So, how you face the changing visual culture of audience?
Yes, thank you for asking that question, because we tend to forget that theatre is so analog, right? It's about physics, it's about mechanics, right? Now, in cinema, yes, people are used to these sort of visual changes, and they're used to being bombarded by these images that are constantly changing, right? More and more so as you get into devices and social media. If you look at Instagram, it's just a video that you see for 30 seconds and then it's gone and then there's something else. I feel that theatre should do just the opposite. I don't know that story about Hanuman fighting this monster, where they all grow bigger in size and the monster grows bigger and he can't grow any bigger. So what Hanuman does is he becomes a fly and then goes into the mouth of the monster. So I think less is more in theatre. I feel that what theatre relies on, yes, it relies on visuals, but we also have the imagination that the audiences bring in with them. And I think if you can tap into that imagination, it can be visually as exciting. I feel that. Like, when I was seeing the Nangyar Kutu, Usha Nangyar's Kutu Patre, she was just sitting on a stool, but I could visualize the whole entry of Krishna into Mathura through Devaki's eyes. The bit that she did was that she is watching from her prison window her son coming in to slay the demon, to slay the king, right? And I could visualize everything. I could even visualize the beauty of Krishna, right? Just by the way she was looking at him through those windows, right? And I could visualize the tears that the mother felt, and I could visualize the moment where her breasts were flooded with milk again, seeing her son come in. And I could visualize that she is also shy, that he's so handsome, and that she didn't want to have that kind of desire for her own son. These are very human. All this was possible, right? Now, cinema sort of choose it for you and gives it. It's like you going to a lovely meal spread there, and your host choose the chicken and then offers it to you and say, I've chewed it for you, so please have it. And then you have it, right? In one sense, that's what a lot of television does for you. That everything is explained, all the emotions are being projected by the actors, anger, sorrow, etc. And it's all chewed and handed to you. Whereas theatre invites you to the meal and says, try this or try this, and the experience, which is rasa, is really your privilege and your entitlement as an audience. So I think to answer your question, yes, theatre relies very much on physics. That if this glass is here and if you don't want it in the next scene, somebody has to take it away. It's not going to magically dissolve at the editing table, right? So those things are of concern, but that's also the beauty of theatre. That as we go more and more digital, that the analog experience is going to come at a premium. That we are going to seek that. The fact that we have an in-person class itself is wonderful. That this itself is an analog experience. That you don't need mics and big auditoria and things. The fact that we could sit in this classroom and have this, that I wanted to make the effort to come over here and speak. Now I just say no because during the pandemic, so much invitations. We would like to invite you, and of course it was a Zoom link and say that this is our send. And so after a time, I just got Zoom fatigue, and I'm sure all of us have been through that, right? But the thing is that it still lingers on. That I still get invitations for these things. That we're going to do it online, and I say no immediately. I say that no. I think we've done enough of that. It's only if it is like international or something that I might accept. I've done a couple of online talks with New York University, and Abu Dhabi also has a NYU chapter. But if it is possible, I think I would prefer that. So yes, it does require an effort, but I think the bigger you try to go visually in the theatre, you're actually comparing, you're making this comparison with cinema, and you're going to look inferior because theatre just cannot have that kind of graphic impact that cinema has. So what does the theatre offer? Real space and imagination. Okay, so I think we could conclude with that.
So much.
Had a wonderful session with Mahesh Dattani, the renowned dramatist, Indian dramatist, and we highly appreciate the way he spoke and all kinds of discussions that we had during this interactive session. And I hope all these discussions that we had on this session was very much fruitful and productive to each and everyone who is present here. So, on behalf of School of Letters Fraternity, I'd like to thank Mahesh Dattani for this wonderful time that he shared with us. And a very special thanks to Ma'am Padma, who accompanied him on this. And one thing which I'd like to say is that so Final Solutions was one of the prescribed text for us. And rather than giving a final solution in that play, you put forward a lot of questions, and that questions which cannot be answered, and which also questions our own beliefs, our own traditions, our culture. So the perpetuality of not being able to answer those questions make that play relevant every time. So I'd like to thank each and everyone who is present here, the staff, faculty, the students, and all the participants who put forward in this program, and who put forward this program and made this a huge success. Thank you.